Well, Kathryn, thanks for joining us on Venture Grounds. Great
Thanks
to have
for
you
having
here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about FirstMark and what you're doing?
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I'm from Texas originally. I've been in venture now, maybe 8 years or so. I spent the first 6 of that at Norwest on the West Coast. Moved out to New York about 5 years ago and continued working for them remotely. And now I'm working at FirstMark. We have been around for 20 years, very much a New York, born and raised kind of firm. And we invest across kind of all the major venture backable categories: consumer tech, full stack enterprise. We have folks who do B2B fintech. But I love all things consumer health, wealth, and happiness. And these days, it tends to be a lot of healthcare.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, FirstMark, obviously massive in New York City. Such a great fund. We'll roll right into it. You went from financial consulting at Deloitte to BizOps at NerdWallet to investing at Norwest to FirstMark. The through line you've written about is helping individuals maximize their potential. What's the actual moment when you realize that's what you actually wanted to spend a career on?
Maybe 2. I was a journalist in high school and thought that was what I'd want to do with my career. I just loved telling other people's stories and shining light on important topics. And then in college, I was a part of the microfinance club and learned about what microfinance was. It was a point where Kiva was really taking off. And we backed a woman in Kyrgyzstan and actually gave her the funds to buy an oven that allowed her to open a bakery and provide for her family.
Oh, wow.
And so what was a relatively small investment that we had fundraised from our little student club really changed someone's life. And so it was a real reminder that small things, especially investment in individual people, can have profound impacts on not only their lives, but their communities. And so that's what I wanted to, that was kind of the couple moments that I wanted to do this as my career.
Love it. You open your FirstMark announcement essay with the line, "Consumers have lost a lot of friends over the past few years, at least in venture." What did you see at Norwest, without naming names, that made you decide the consumer thesis needed a different home, not just a different fund?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we did a lot of consumer at Norwest too. Consumer's just hard. It's one of those categories where it's more binary than your typical, at least enterprise SaaS has been in the past. And it requires seeing around the corners perhaps a bit more than enterprise, where there's more linear thinking around like what are the enterprise priorities, what are their needs, how do we create technology against those needs. Consumers are more emotional in really beautiful and important ways. And as a result of that, you have to consistently show up for them and earn their trust and business over and over again. And that can be a difficult thing from a financial allocation perspective. And so as I think about where I spend my time at FirstMark, I mean, we have a long history of backing consumer companies, even back to being a very early investor in Pinterest. Yeah. And we've seen time and time again the early signals that tend to lead to pretty impressive engagement over time. And where consumer companies tend to fall off is they either don't make it to start, or they more often have some sort of early user base that you have people who love them, and then the mistake would be to extrapolate that out to the whole world. Yeah. And we tend to feel like we know what to look for to help determine what's durable. And durability is really the big question in consumer.
What are some of those other early signals that you guys are good at finding?
Yeah, I think it's understanding the megatrends in the market. So what are the things that are the waves, whether it's demographic, psychographic, regulatory, anything that unlocks a massive behavioral shift over time. And usually then thinking about the downstream effects of that. And so if a company is participating in that arena, more often than not, it earns them the right to make a bunch of mistakes along the way and still succeed. But really retention, engagement and retention, unpaid or paid, you should see your users really coming back and begging you for more, both of your current product and of, hey, can you do this for me as well?
Given I feel like consumer absolutely ripped when AI kind of took off, and then it kind of went through like a phase, and then now it's like seems to be really going again. I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about what's sort of consumer utility that people are getting. So there were a lot of early tools that were really fun to use. They were just exercising the muscle of what AI can do and seeing that flex, which was really cool.
Especially with smaller teams, right?
Especially
like companies
with
can iterate
teams.
super quick. They don't need as many people.
Yeah.
More people are like they're willing to take that risk to try a bunch of different stuff really fast.
Totally. So people are trying it, but there kind of are two things that has to happen. One, you need to have a product that actually does something for someone that they want to keep coming back to and ideally pay for over time, or at least have a model where somebody's paying for it. And then two, we're in a really competitive world. You need to have a differentiated product that can outrun not only other startups, but big foundation model companies, established players. The speed of development has never been faster, which is both a blessing and a curse. Yeah. And so we really are trying to prioritize companies that build something really durable.
Yeah. Your consumer revival thesis says people are sick of giving their time away to extractive platforms that ultimately undermine their health, wealth, and happiness. Counter that, TikTok keeps growing, Instagram engagement still rising, and the most addictive apps are still the most valuable. Where's your thesis that's actually winning right now, and where is it still wishful thinking?
Yeah, time is finite. So all these platforms may be getting more users, more engagement, but at some point, there is only 24 hours that each of us has in the day. And as that is the most precious resource, any consumer business is going to have to fight for some allocation of your mind share. But what we're seeing is this whole generation of companies coming out that are more oriented towards a do-it-for-me approach as opposed to just show me how to do it or just entertain me. Yeah. Even those platforms that you mentioned, many of them are shifting from being passive content consumption, entertainment platforms to real commerce platforms. Okay. And so you're seeing like a shift in how people are using even the same platforms, because I think even the big guys recognize the shift that's happening. And I would imagine it only grows.
Mm-hmm. Function Health, 365 for what would traditionally cost 10 grand. It's 27x price collapse. Walk me through the moment you got conviction this wasn't going to break, and when the most consumer healthcare companies have died on unit economics or trust. What was the specific piece of evidence that flipped you?
Sure. Function's been an incredible story to watch and be a part of. They did a couple things really well. One, in this category, speed to scale really mattered. And they chose to really focus on blood testing because of the 80-20 value that it provided, and get to a scale that allowed them to have great negotiating leverage with their supply partner, so Quest.
Okay, so just get as many people in labs as you can.
Yeah, and so once you get to that point, the cost of any individual blood test you can negotiate down, versus if you tried to go in and get those same number of tests, it would be super expensive because you're getting at a retail pricing.
Terribly painful to deal with Quest Diagnostics or whatever. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so they did that really well. And then the second piece that is the piece that got us over the line was the retention side. Okay. A lot of people, when they first heard about Function or the blood testing category, thought, one, I don't know how I feel about needles. So we saw a real shift in behavior change happening. Two, maybe I'll do that once, but unless there's something terribly wrong with me, I'm going to, use it as a nice to have and then move on. And what was crazy cool is we saw people coming back at, best in class doesn't quite cover it, just really strong rates. And not only that, buying Function for their partner, for their family. Because if you're going to invest in your own health, typically you think about who are your loved ones that should also be buying this product. Mm-hmm. And not only buying the 365 sort of annual package, which covers a lot of blood tests, but buying additional, they allow you to buy additional tests kind of a la carte, and then even consider getting a full body MRI scan through Ezra, which they acquired, which was also in our portfolio.
Okay.
So because of the scale that Function has, they've been able to bring down the cost for any individual buyer.
You have all the consumers that want to go in that category. That's interesting, the Ezra thing. Obviously, yeah. I think that came up the other morning at our breakfast that we had. Someone brought up Ezra because I'd even asked about, hey, getting an MRI and if that's right for everybody.
Totally, and it's obviously something that every individual needs to think through for themselves. The criticism or risk in that space is more often that you might find something that you feel like you should do something about. Mm-hmm. They actually call it incidentalomas, because people, when you find something on a scan, most proactive people that are bothering to get a scan want to do something about it.
Yeah, of course.
And the reality is that often the best course of action is actually just monitoring, because there are risks associated with invasive interventions.
Yeah.
And, we don't want that. But even if you're perfectly healthy and find absolutely nothing, it provides a great baseline.
That's what I was just gonna say. Like the baseline for everybody provides like peace of mind to like know where things are at. Just like, I don't know, I'm pretty into that stuff too. So like I would want to know and go do it.
Totally. And then the other thing that I think was a bit surprising to a lot of people who got to know what they were up to at Function is they thought this was a product for the elite. This was a very coastal product that was very expensive. But because Function's been able to keep the cost very accessible, we did a big study before we ever partnered with Function just around who uses the product today and what they think. This was a while ago at this point. And it would shock you the percentage of households with under 100K household income who were not only buying Function, but having a super high intent to retain or even demonstrated retention, and buying it for their family and doing it more. And for them, it's investing in themselves. And there's really no more important thing to invest in than our health.
Yeah, that's awesome. In your June 2025 healthcare piece, you wrote that winners need to be win-win-win for patient, provider, and payer. In practice, every successful healthcare company sacrifices at least one of those three early on. Which one gets sacrificed most often, and is that always wrong?
The one that should never be sacrificed is the patient. And not just because that's the right thing to do, because we're seeing a huge shift towards patients taking control of their own health and being willing to pay out of pocket against that. There used to be this mindset in sort of the health community that health was something that essentially a third party paid for. And that creates really weird dynamics around the incentives that different players have.
Totally shifting. People buying vitamins nonstop, and now companies are testing all those things, and like FSA now, like gyms, like accepting that is like a wild thing.
Totally. I mean, it's, I think, really for the better.
Of course.
When that consumers have the opportunity to pay out of pocket for things, whether that's a part of their deductible. I mean, we're seeing this shift towards higher deductible plans, which means that even when you're doing something that is covered by insurance, you're essentially paying out of pocket anyway. Because you haven't reached your deductible yet. And when that happens, it creates a lot more shopping behaviors that are more typical that we see in a lot of other categories. And when the consumer's the one paying, it's amazing how businesses respond and build the product and the product experience to reflect that.
Versus the insurance provider.
Absolutely. And even from a consumer psychology perspective, you see when people are paying for something, almost always they are more engaged. They are they have agency in the process. And I think it's transformational for how people think about taking care of themselves.
Yeah, totally. And it's not easy to navigate anything on Blue Cross. So, you've written about Yuan Zhang at Wyze, his line about making friends with users. You backed Wyze as a low-cost hardware company when most VCs dismissed it. What did Yuan see that the rest of the venture didn't? And what's the one thing you've watched consumer founders systematically fail to copy from that playbook since?
Yeah, it's interesting. So this was my first ever venture investment. This was back in 2018, fresh out of business school and really excited about, backing consumer tech companies. And at that time, there was a sense that, home security addressed a certain portion of the market, but that cameras in the home was perceived to be a higher end product that only certain folks could afford. But the truth of the matter is, everyone wants to protect their home. Perhaps folks that are not in as secure of living situations need it even more. And even beyond the security piece, everybody finds their life fascinating and there's stuff to watch. So it doesn't have to always be about security. It could be watching your pet at home while you're at work. It could be seeing
I do that on my Ring.
Right.
Like I'll just see what's going on with my pup.
Totally. It could be seeing if there are packages on your porch or just keeping track of your life. And as we've seen consumers monitor their health, consumers, just have more connected devices across their whole life, the home was this huge area that was really underserved, and particularly underserved in an affordable way for consumers. And so what Yuan did a really good job of was building a brand that was very focused on accessible pricing, but not compromising on product quality, and then building a brand around that made friends with users. And the idea was to build a trusted brand because there's such a high bar to put a camera in your home. ideally multiple cameras in your home watching different parts. And to do that and to feel like they have your back, not only from the fact that there's a camera in your home, but also can I rely on Wyze when something does go wrong and I need to go check the tape? I want to make sure that it's going to be there when I need it. And so they did a really good job of just building that brand identity that has made it fun and engaging and helped them grow a ton. And it was a funny time because I think that a lot of people in venture hesitate to back consumer hardware. It's just for obvious reasons.
But not now.
Yeah,
like it's everything now. It's
the world is very pendular. We've really come full circle on that.
We're back.
But at the time, it was a lot of people hemmed and hawed around low margin hardware, especially when you're trying to do it hard to scale, and you're trying to do it as cost effectively for the consumer as possible, which comes at the expense of your own margins. And so there was a real trade-off there. Yeah. But what was amazing is because they unlocked access for so many people, they built this huge hardware install base and then very thoughtfully introduced a subscription product on top of it that wasn't required, but allowed people to have premium services on the back of this hardware base that they already have in their homes. And it couldn't have come at a better time because now that computer vision is able to interpret video data so much more effectively, you could say, let me know when this type of car pulls in my driveway because that's some signal that someone's coming to drop something off. I didn't even
think about that. That's awesome.
You can get really specific. Wow. Let me know if my dog does this. Maybe gets on the couch.
Wow.
And there are so many use cases that never would have been possible before. And the team at Wyze was really forward thinking to play to where the puck is going.
Yeah, that's awesome. You wrote that no other city would allow Pickles founders to hand deliver so many customers in such a short time. The New York hustle is a real product advantage. Most consumer tech investors say SF has the edge. Where does New York consumer hustle outperform San Francisco, and where is it just romanticism on your part?
Romanticism.
Also biased myself.
First of all, there's, I think, nothing wrong with, when you say romanticism, I think it suggests that it's not true, as opposed to a spirit that is actually like emotive and very true. SF and New York have both created great consumer businesses. I do think that the closer that a business is tied to other industry, so whether it's commerce or fintech or health, those all touch tons of different types of consumers, and yet I think are more difficult for SF to do as well, only because we're just so...
It's concentrated.
Yeah, it's so concentrated here, and there's also so many different types of consumers, and I think the bar is really high for folks to give their time and attention in New York, whereas culturally it's a little bit more tech-oriented in the Bay Area, and so people are always trying new things, but it can lead to, I think, a false positive. I think you really have to earn it here, which is, I think, a sign of more durability.
Yeah. The biggest thing a consumer health founder gets wrong in the first 60 seconds of pitching you, what is it? Not a deck mistake, a thinking mistake?
Not owning the time. So a lot of times I have founders start the meeting or the call and they sort of look at me like, happy to answer any questions, or sort of like I'm meant to drive the call. And certainly I can and I'm happy to, but this is their time and I should be there in service of them. Even if we're the right partner for investment, this time should be used to help me understand your business so that I can be hopefully an evangelist for your business, if not as an investor, as just a friend of the company over time. And so usually 30 minutes is not a lot of time to have an initial conversation. And so the founders that really show up owning that time speaks to probably how they are leaders more broadly.
Yeah, I love that, like creating an evangelist too, obviously because investors are connected to a lot of other investors, so if it's not a great fit for you.
Oh yeah, I send folks all the time to different firms, and I think some founders worry about the signaling there, but when you're in this business long enough, you recognize that there are a bunch of really interesting companies, many of whom will be fabulous investments, but only a fraction of them are the right fit for me for 1,000 reasons. And so as long as I help introduce them to the right folks, I think that helps me be a positive contributor to the ecosystem more broadly. And I think it all comes back around.
100%. I love it. And I mean, tell us about GLP-1s. What's going on?
It's wild. It's one of the biggest health tailwinds of our generation.
Yeah.
I mean, something like 1 in 8 American adults have tried a GLP-1, and like 10 to 15 million people already on it.
Peptides, right?
Yeah. You know, peptides are probably, even though GLP-1s are a peptide, I mean, so is insulin, so are a lot of other things. Peptides are, I perhaps might incorporate that into what I view as part of the downstream effects of GLP-1s. Okay. So maybe just taking GLP-1 specifically, there are huge impacts that it's having on people's ability to manage their weight and manage a bunch of other conditions that they're still testing how it impacts. But what's wild is that something like over 90, maybe it's 92% of people are off a GLP-1 by year 3. So they and it's having huge impact. So whether they come back on it or not, you are seeing a bunch of people come on GLP-1s and go off GLP-1s, and their body is changing in the process. And so you're seeing people think about, maybe the first wave was think about protein, because when you lose weight normally, even without a GLP-1, you tend to also lose some lean muscle mass. On a GLP-1, you tend to lose a higher portion of lean muscle mass relative to baseline. And so it's really important to make sure your protein intake is up. You also see people thinking about eating more fiber, because one of the impacts that GLP-1s have is slowing your digestive system. And so it's really important to make sure you're taking care of your gut health in that process. But there are things that people don't even think about. So people are starting to talk about bone health as an important part of making sure you're taking care of yourself in a GLP-1 world.
Gotta lift your weights.
Because what happens is people are not just eating, they're eating less, they're not necessarily eating better. So it's amazing how the first thing to go is like the extra maybe serving of vegetables or whatever. And so people I think it's what Grunes did so well, because they're helping people fill in that gap. And it's obviously probably better to eat your real vegetables, but supplements are riding this tailwind hugely. You also see on the aesthetic side, I mean, when people lose weight, they also lose weight in their face, which contributes to accelerated aging. And so I think we'll have a huge boom of sort of medical aesthetics on the back of that. So, some of these categories are areas where we would spend time as investors, and many are physical products or treatments that are outside of my investment scope. But more broadly, I think what's really cool is you're seeing people start to think about their body more as a product, and a product that requires ongoing measurement, ongoing, testing, obviously in a safe, clinically rigorous and medical oversight way. But it's a lot more proactive. And so when you brought up peptides, it's interesting because one of the impacts of GLP-1s is it has normalized self-injection. And made people who otherwise would have been uncomfortable with needles or unsure about it,
now they have full fridges of stuff.
Totally willing to do it regularly and commit to that process because they've seen the tremendous impact it can have. Now, I highly discourage anyone from, using a for research use only product or doing anything outside of the guidelines of medical care. But I do think we will see an expanded view of how we measure our health and more proactive things that you can do to health optimize, such that people who would otherwise be on no medications as a healthy adult turn to certain, whether it's peptides or GLP-1s or other products, to optimize their health and get ahead of problems that may come for them down the line. So I think we're at a really exciting, maybe scary time, because consumers are doing things that are
totally taking it into their own hands.
Taking into their own hands beyond the scope of empowerment into the scope of real risk. And so I really hope that we don't see anything. I imagine we will see some sort of negative consequence from that, and we already have. I mean, there have been instances of folks in the news taking for research use only products and having real negative consequences for that.
Almost like looks-maxing shit, like whatever that is.
But the trouble with that is not only the impact on those individuals and the risk to any individual, but also because it may set back the whole category. If you have
something bad happens.
Something really bad happens, and there's going to be a huge amount of
No longer getting FDA
oversight.
approved. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and whether or not you believe that any of these individual peptides that are under consideration for being put back on the list where they could be compounded in the U.S., whether you think those should happen or not is a separate conversation.
Yeah.
But at minimum, we should solve for having safe products
Correct.
compounded in a very safe way with oversight, and then start to help patients understand their options.
Yeah.
Rather than just telling them that this is not a category we should look at or understand. If there's this much consumer interest, we should at least seek to understand it and allow people to be a part of that process.
Massive opportunity for people building companies in space.
Yeah, and we're seeing, and the ones that are being built right now are growing like crazy.
Yeah.
I think some more responsibly than others, but yeah.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
we'll see. It'll be exciting.
Yeah. Okay, so now for this or that, you pick one.
Okay.
Consumer hardware with subscription attached or pure software consumer with network effects?
Oh, network effects every time.
Founder with 100,000 followers or founder with 5 repeat customers?
B2B or B2C if these customers?
B2C.
Oh, if it's only 5 customers and it's consumer, I'll stick with 100,000 followers. But if it's B2B customers, it might be different.
Yeah. D2C first, then enterprise, or enterprise first, then D2C?
Consumer first.
Wearable hardware or software-only digital health?
In most categories, software-only digital health, the one exception may be brain health.
500,000 ARR growing 20% month over month, or 5 million ARR growing 5% month over month?
Fast growth compounds every time.
Reorder rate or NPS?
Reorder rate.
Reorder rate at 6 months or referral rate at 6 months?
Reorder rate.
Patient,
I don't do a lot of physical products, but I think
I
retention
love
speaks
it.
volumes.
Patient paid or payer reambused?
Patient paid.
Yeah, I feel like I could have guessed that for you.
Yeah.
First mover in a new category or fast follower in a hot one?
In healthcare, it's tricky because the first movers in healthcare, if you look historically, don't always win.
Yeah.
And they spend a lot of time educating the market, and they're usually early, whether it's on a regulatory, customer acceptance, something side. Like it's pretty clear, that pattern. So I might say fast follower.
All right, funded or pass? Female-founded consumer health startup, direct-to-consumer hormone testing, founders and former McKinsey associate, very timely, who experienced the problem personally. 2 competitors already in public, one acquired by Function Health, one independent. She's raising 4 million seed at 20 million posts, strong brand, no clinical advisory board yet, 200,000 MRR after 6 months. Funded or pass?
I think that's pretty impressive revenue ramp. If it was a recurring product, I'd be tempted to fund it.
AI native financial coach for Gen Z. 0 to 1 million ARR in 7 months, all organic, no paid, no acquisition. Founder's 24, dropped out of Vanderbilt, has 80,000 TikTok followers, built around explaining personal finance. 70% of his users came from his own TikTok, asking 10 million on a 50 post. Funded or pass?
It's a really tough category. That one's, pass for that one.
AI agent that books, navigates, and disputes medical bills on behalf of patients. 2 co-founders, both ex-Google product, no clinical background, no healthcare industry hires yet. Demo is striking, saving a test patient $4,300 on a single bill. They're going direct consumer first, then white labeling to employers and payers, raising 6 million seed at 30 posts. Funded or passed?
Like the category, I've looked at a few in this space. I'd like to see more than just financial offering, because I think this kind of product needs to be in a suite.
Yeah.
So would like to understand the product roadmap, but for now, pass.
Consumer mental health app, but go-to-market is selling to school districts who then push to students for free. Co-founder is a clinical psychologist with 15 years of practice. The other is a former Headspace PM. 0 revenue, 12 LOIs from districts, 3 pilots starting in the fall, raising 3 million at 15.
Yeah, I think tops-down products, especially that are meant to reach consumers, are really tough, particularly working with school districts, also very tough. So the product may be great, but I would encourage bottoms-up adoption, so I'll pass.
Longevity-focused subscription product, monthly blood panels plus a wearable plus an AI coach. $89 a month, founder's a 38-year-old former Peloton senior PM with no medical background. CAC is $300, payback 4 months, 14% monthly churn, raising 5 million seed at 25.
beyond the fact that I'm probably conflicted out of this one.
Yeah.
14% monthly churn is I think that gets you to like
That's not good.
12% or 16%, maybe 16% retention long term. Like that's or at a year, and we like to see 40% plus at a year.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Espresso questions. Subway line you actually like?
I walk everywhere, but I don't live quite close to a subway station, but I'll say the ACE gets me where I need to go.
Nice.
I wouldn't say it's a deep love, but
Yeah.
it gets the job done.
Yeah. GSB class you'd repeat?
So I really enjoyed Touchy Feely, which is probably the most popular class at GSB.
Wow.
Have you heard of that?
No. Tell us.
So it's not actually called Touchy Feely. It's called Interpersonal Dynamics.
Touchy feely is way better.
Yeah, so everyone calls it Touchy Feely because it's kind of the feelings class.
Yeah.
And the structure is, I think it's a 12-ish or maybe 16-person class.
Okay.
And it's focused on driving self-awareness of how you come across other people with the goal of building better connection. So how can you build better relationships by knowing yourself first? And they create this format of the class where you have a bunch of different exercises. There's a facilitator, but the facilitator's role is really meant to be a smaller portion, and really it's self-guided. But they encourage essentially radical honesty, and they teach you frameworks of how to communicate. So if someone's not making eye contact with you when you're talking, you're encouraged to vocalize that and say something like, when you don't make eye contact when we're talking, I feel unheard. And that framework helps create a moment of connection, and it's, emotionally a journey for a lot of people, but I think a class that I wish everybody took.
Sounds like Meisner. It's like an acting method.
Yeah,
Very
it's
similar.
honestly probably very similar, but it's really just about like, so many people go through the world never getting real feedback.
Yep.
And you can choose to take it, you can choose to not. You're not here to please everybody, but you should at least know. And then the class I might take, because I feel like I got a lot out of that, but the class I might take again was Path to Power. So this is a pretty famous class too, but it's much more controversial in that I think power for a lot of people gets a negative rap because it suggests or implies that if I'm pursuing power, then I must be pursuing it at the expense of something else. But what I've realized over time is that with the world the way it is today, we need leadership more than ever. And power doesn't have to be, use of force against someone, at the expense of their free will. It's more about expressing your values in a way that is effective in the world. And how do you build something underneath you so that when you do speak, people listen. And you can do that and hopefully use that in a really responsible way that helps build up other people in the process too. And I actually think if everybody did that, just to use the logical extreme, we would have a world that was much more confident, that was much more comfortable with who they were, much more able to have productive conflict with one another because it's around, you know who you are enough that you can have that healthy conflict without it being a threat to your identity. So I think that would be a good class to retake.
I love that. Those are both awesome. One thing Norwest taught you that FirstMark gets right differently.
Norwest is a firm that's super old, over 60 years old, and very much Midwestern in its origins. So it has really healthy Midwestern values behind it, which I really admired, especially given the reputation that venture can have around being, full of bravado and all that. And so Norwest was very focused on being in service of their founders and showing up with a no ego kind of way and earning it each time. And that leads to the right to win. And I think they did that really beautifully. What I have tried to take that mindset and do more of with at FirstMark is be a little bit more public about that versus have it be this beautiful secret that that each founder gets to experience when they interact with you, but rather share that more broadly so that trust is built a little bit before you even meet. So at FirstMark, the person who does this really well is Matt Turk. So he's built a great online presence. He has a podcast. He's hilarious on Twitter. He's a really genuine person. And it's allowed him to scale the trust and founder first mentality that I think a lot of good investors have. I don't think, I don't think he's the only person who has that, or Norwest is the only group that has it, but a lot of people don't talk about it enough or show it really enough. And it's funny because in a business where we're all focused on scale all the time and scalability, it's harder for that characteristic to find its way to be seen unless you put intentional thought behind it.
I mean, it's a fantastic job from you guys on branding.
No, well,
to get that out of the world. Yeah,
I appreciate that, and I certainly both for the firm and then for myself. I think every individual investor should think about how they're contributing to their firm's brand and reputation, but then also think about how they're being known in the market as individuals as well. Because what is a firm other than a composition of individuals?
Yeah. The most contrarian piece of your consumer thesis.
Most contrarian. Maybe that. I mean, it kind of, I guess, depends who you ask, but maybe that seniors are a really good demographic to serve. This is, it's been called a million things, silver tech, age tech,
Wait, silver tech?
Silver tech, yeah.
I haven't heard that yet. That's funny.
One of the slicker ways to describe serving that demographic. But historically has been very hard. And I stand by the fact that some of the best consumer tech products that have served seniors have been the best unlock for seniors. So for example, Uber has been huge for our elders, and yet is not at all branded as a consumer, as a product, designed for folks who can't drive anymore. And so for a long time, my perspective was I want to find great consumer companies that then can serve this population. Because serving them directly has been really hard because you're selling to, perhaps someone who's not as digitally native. You're also having to make sure you engage their caregiver, which is also often their adult child. Their needs can vary a lot. So it's been a tough category, and there's been a lot of companies that have tried and failed in this space. But I'm a big believer that, I forget who said it, but there's a quote that's there's no bad ideas, it's just bad timing. And I think there's a lot of truth to that in consumer, because the core need is still there.
Yeah.
And the demographic shifts are so profound that you are seeing now, call it our young seniors, sort of the 65 to 75 set, that have had iPhones for a long time, that have worked in the workforce as they are using the internet. They're continuing to work longer. They're hearing all the same, information that we are around proactive health. About using ChatGPT, totally. And I think there is a renewed opportunity to serve them, both because of those younger seniors being more digitally native and because of the opportunity for AI to help bridge some of the gaps that existed in a lot of services-heavy models that now can have the administrative part of service really reduced.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. Best way for a consumer founder to get on your calendar without a warm intro?
I don't think it's any different than how I try to get on their calendar without a warm intro. We are both in some version of a sales role, trying to build connection and trust with one another. And I find what's most effective for me, if I don't have a warm intro to a founder that I'd like to meet with, I usually reach out, sharing a bit about who I am, show some knowledge about their space, ideally about their company, maybe something I saw that they wrote or something that I saw that they did in terms of an event they hosted or regulation they had a comment on. And that usually gets you, and then keep it short. I think the worst is when people try to overshare because it's tough to parse through all of that. And then, if they have a little deck or intro, that's always helpful, but shorter is better. Yeah.
And what's the worst way?
Tricking me?
Tell me more about that. When have you been tricked?
There have been folks that have emailed and start the email in a way that suggests that we already agreed to meet, and this was just scheduling. And then there are...
Don't do that.
And then more commonly, there are folks who don't disclose they've met with others at the firm, thinking that sort of another shot on goal.
Yeah, sneaky.
And we do communicate with one another, and if we didn't, that would be a problem for the founders that we work with. So those are short-sighted ways to go about it.
Don't be sneaky.
Yeah.
First minute of a pitch, what are you scanning for?
Clarity of thought, for sure. I have so much respect for people that know their space well enough to start with kind of what's where are we going, what's really important and about that, and how do we get there? And you can hear it. It goes back to what we were saying around owning the conversation, but answering the question directly. Even in the first 60 seconds, you can tell how someone's clarity of thought is by how they communicate.
Yeah, love that. Slide consumer founders should just delete.
Maybe like their hyper detail on how they measure their market size, or think about their, sometimes they really hammer home the problem area. And I gotta promise you, I understand the problem area. If I'm looking at your space, I know the problem area.
Yeah.
And if I don't really believe the problem area, we wouldn't be talking.
Yeah.
And so you can mention it, and certainly if there's a nuance that you want to call out, but
you don't have to belabor it. Yeah.
You don't have to belabor it, and then the false precision around the addressable market is a waste of time. It's not that, I'm going to do my own market sizing, and so, I think the time is better spent elsewhere.
Best D2C metric you don't see on most decks.
I think I would really appreciate seeing some level of detail on cohorts.
Okay.
That's usually something that comes with the data room. But I think especially if you have the good metrics for that, to really show how that's growing, whether it's engagement or retention or whatever the metric is, because durability is the big question on everybody's mind in consumer tech right now. And I would love for them to get that credit for it right away. And then maybe the other one would be, I wish I saw more paid CAC. There's a lot of blended CAC and lack of...
be very direct.
Yeah, and lack of clarity. And it needs to be like fully weighted. Just like show me that you know how you're measuring things. Yeah. And there's a lot of sometimes strategic ambiguity on acquisition channels.
So it can be a red flag for you.
Yeah, so the clearer you are, the more I can understand the business quickly, which helps me focus on the big picture things, and the big picture things are what gets people over the line. The little things are just reasons why we won't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reference check question that actually tells you something.
With reference check is we do obviously some front channel, but mostly back channel references. So I'm already talking to someone who knows that it will be a confidential conversation that won't get back to the founder. They'll never even know we spoke. But really what you're listening for and pressing for is inconsistency, so it's so easy for people to say the positive things about someone, and understandably they want to make sure that's included if they've had a positive experience. But everybody's human. And so my goal is in the reference is obviously to catch any major red flags, but more often to understand the nuance of someone and their leadership style. And so listening for inconsistencies helps me know where to push, but then also understand, to specifically your question of what questions to ask, what are failure modes for this person? When things go wrong, what's it like? Because things will go wrong. And then I do sometimes ask to that end, if you were building a team around this person, what characteristics would you look for in that teammate? And that usually either tells me something about their working style that's unique to them.
That's cool.
Or it tells me, people tend to feel comfortable sharing the compliment of what the leader has. So they might be like, you really need someone who's really willing to listen. And it's like, okay, so this person doesn't listen because they just talk a lot. Or you really need someone who's hyper analytical, because he's more a vision guy. And so it's not to say that they don't have any of that, but that's a way to parse out weaknesses in a way that may not be disqualifying, but are important to understand.
Most overrated consumer category right now?
Maybe the triage companies.
Okay.
All the health triage companies that are trying to understand.
Tell me more.
The big question there is there's not lack of demand. Many people have health questions. Many people are going to ChatGPT anyway and other platforms. And right now, some of the companies that have been built on the back of basically answering medical questions without then providing an additional service there, I worry that they don't own the relationship with the patient over time.
Yeah, totally.
Some of them are thinking about how do we build that longitudinal relationship, but you have to have that to win in this space. And so, I used to work at NerdWallet, and one of the things that was challenging about what NerdWallet's model was, is NerdWallet had a great brand. People trusted the information that it shared with them, but the way people came to them was they Googled a financial question.
Yep.
And what type of credit card is best for a frequent traveler? Then they find a NerdWallet article and they'd read it and they maybe get the credit card, and that would be the happy path of success.
Yeah.
But then 6 months later, they have a question about what kind of house can I afford, or what how much of a mortgage should I think about getting, and they don't go to NerdWallet.
Yeah.
They go to Google.
Yeah.
And they Google it again, and NerdWallet has to earn that business again. And so that's why SEO is so important for NerdWallet.
Yeah.
And so as I think about in health, how folks are trying to own the front door to health, you really have to create a logged-in experience that keeps people coming to you as their primary stop.
That's the truth, yeah.
And I think some of the players are definitely moving in that direction, but that would be an important existential question for me.
That's great. Most underrated digital health subcategory?
Brain health. It is I hate to say final frontier, but it is the last major organ that we know very little about, that we don't measure directly. Even all the fancy wearables that are on Gen whatever, they measure it by proxy. And so they do the best they can. And I think they've gotten pretty good, but they're using a lot of cardiac data to measure brain activity. And so anxious worry can seem the same as, being upset about something. And those are different feelings. And as we live in this hyperstimulated world, I do feel like people are going to want to not just understand the brain, but actually influence it.
Okay.
So every wearable that you might have tried is pretty much read-only today. I think the huge opportunity is in moving, to borrow a software analogy, moving from read to write, which basically means you can neuromodulate back to the brain. And very gently, non-invasively, maybe over time invasively, but that's outside my scope. You can gently guide the brain to certain states. So, for example, there's a company that is a patch that they're working on, and it's not in the market yet, but it stimulates the vagus nerve to help you focus.
Wow.
Yeah. There's another company called Elemind that uses a headband that you wear while you sleep, and measures the brain signals directly, and then emits sound to help intercept those brain signals to help you bring you down to a calmer, more sleep-ready state.
So you deeper REM sleep.
So it helps you fall asleep, stay asleep, but it does it in a hyper-personalized way. So those are two examples of completely safe, non-invasive, nothing scary ways to actually gently guide the brain to the state you want. And if you think about it, because that can freak people out to think,
8 sleep on steroids, watch out.
Exactly. And it is funny because I think a lot of people hear neuromodulation and they're like, that's spooky. That could go haywire. And obviously there are versions of it that you have to be very careful of. But arguably almost everything we do is an attempt at neuromodulation. We listen to music. We have a bedtime routine. We, drink coffee before we focus. There's so much that we do to try to guide our minds to the right state. Even when we're trying to have fun, we create an environment around us for that. So I think there's a lot we can do with brain health, and we're probably a bit early, certainly for the Series A stage that I love to spend my time in.
But a lot of people are going into that space.
But a lot of people are going into this space, and the information that we'll have about it will be better and better. And I'm not entirely sure yet what the form factor or core technology will be, but my sense is that there will be one metric, the same way readiness score or recovery score, HRV, there'll be one thing that you look at and measure over time for a certain product, and then guide your actions against.
Consumer brand you think will own longevity in 5 years?
Function, I think, is really well positioned, but I truthfully don't think it's just going to be one company. I think longevity is a huge concept. It's more of a concept than a category. Longevity right now is framed as such partly because people are still shifting from this concept of healthcare to health. And by that I mean healthcare is this episodic, reactive, no news is good news kind of environment, and it's pretty private. And we're moving to a world focused on health, which is more continuous, more proactive, and importantly, a sense of identity.
And so it's hands.
It's in the patient's hands, and people are willing to share it. Like one of the things with Function that is, I think, been a really helpful component of their growth is they measure your biological age. And so for certain folks, it can be much lower or higher depending on your health. But for a lot of proactive, health optimizers, it's much lower than their biological age or their chronological age.
They want to share that.
And they want to share it.
If it's higher, you're like, maybe I don't share that.
Yeah, and then maybe I work on it, whatever. But it's all good. But the thing is, even if there is a sense of false precision in biological age, which is, not a metric that Function made up, it's an existing concept, and there are a few different ways to measure it. It's the kind of thing that people want to brag about, talk about, share. And in a world where you kind of can't brag about other things, people don't feel comfortable bragging about, professional success, understandably, even like life stage status, like marital status or kids, or those things are touchier now, and for very understandable reasons. But nobody can blame you for being proud of your health.
Correct.
And it's sort of the only moral space that you can really sit in and be proud of yourself and feel like you've taken agency over your life.
Yeah.
In a world where people feel super unmoored and are looking for a sense of self and identity, I think health becomes even more important than it has been.
No, I love that. Most useful thing you've stolen from another VC's playbook?
Rick said something. So I work with Rick Heitzman, and he said something when I first joined that has really stuck with me. We were talking about all these different interesting spaces that we were excited about, and he does a good job of creating separation between what's interesting and what's compelling. And as an investor, I could spend all day thinking about fascinating ways the world's changing and the technology supporting it and the people building it, and I could just swim around in that all day and have a great time. But the nuance of being a great investor is finding something that is not just interesting, but is a compelling investable opportunity today. A lot of that puts a lot of pressure on getting timing of the market just right, and finding the characteristics of the founders that are positioned to win that market. And so that's been helpful, because in a world where there are more interesting things than I could possibly think about in a given day, being able to triage what is interesting but not compelling allows me to move it aside in favor of things that are interesting and compelling today, and then revisit in the future. If it's a timing issue, I can come back to it. If it's a founder fit issue, I can keep my eye out for other founders. But that's I think an important way to allow me to prioritize my time well.
Best red flag that's actually a green flag?
Maybe founders that are either slower to take feedback or feedback is not some sort of given. They really think about it. Sometimes that can come across as defensive, but what I found is in the best founders, it often reflects first principles thinking. We come into the conversation having seen a bunch of companies grow at similar stages and similar categories, and hopefully have a lot to add to the conversation. And sometimes maybe it's a spectrum. A really weak founder will just take whatever you say and take it and not question it, or consider how the nuance of what might be best for their situation. And a really weak founder on the other dimension might never listen and never get the benefit of having a partner around the table who has seen it before. But there's a middle line where they can sound a little defensive at first, or sound like they need more convincing. But that's often a reflection of someone who really wants to come to the decision themselves and make sure that they fully understand it, so that they can make changes as needed given in their circumstances. And that tends to build a tighter relationship with your investment team, because you can have a real conversation about it, and lead to better outcomes for what's the right decision for our company at this time.
Deal you passed on that's still bothering you?
This one's a mix. So I passed on the seed in Whatnot. And to be fair, I was at Norwest, we were a Series A focused team, and they hadn't launched live commerce yet.
Got it.
But Grant from the jump was a super strong founder. I remember having a conversation. I was home during COVID. I was walking around my backyard and chatting with him about this opportunity, and he was telling me about Funko Pops and all these things. And we just needed to see some data of the live commerce platform.
Yeah.
And very quickly that became evident that it was just a really beautiful marketplace flywheel, already starting, tons of overlap between buyers and sellers, a lot of product velocity, huge categories, ability to expand into other categories. They had a strong approach to authentication. Like, it was just a very, I think, clear winner from even the early days. So even a few months after that, they started to raise their A. And so we were around the table for the conversation. Unfortunately, Jeff Jordan was the partner that he went with for that, for his Series A round. But if I hadn't passed on the seed, I wouldn't have had to worry about the A.
If you had to take a year off and build a consumer company tomorrow, what would it be?
If I felt like I was the right founder for it, I think I would pursue brain health.
I was kind of going to guess that.
But that's, sort of an impractical thing, because I think really in that category you need someone who's much more technical in that space. If I were to start a company inclusive of my expertise and background, I might do something in senior care. I think there's a huge opportunity to create a suite of services for seniors that's AI native, but has humans in very strategic spots that'll ensure high touch when needed, and that will drive 10-year relationships with this patient population and can make huge differences in their lives.
Of course.
So maybe one of those two.
I love it. That's all we got. Kathryn, thanks for coming on. This was fantastic.
Thanks so much for having me.